Please welcome to the stage Sam Lee, Jeneda and Clayson Benally, and Jake Blount.
How are we all? You're here, you've showed up. Thank you so much, everyone. It's a real honor to be here back in Kansas. My name is Sam Lee. I'm from London, England, and it feels very powerful to be able to be part of this conversation with these extraordinary artists who I've never met but have known of for a long while, and it's always one of the joyful things about being an artist and getting to go into discussions like these with my colleagues and share in the enormous difference in perspectives on the subject of the climate, the ecological emergency, activism, and our roles as artists in the sharing of the stories and the speaking of the truths. My background is I'm an Englishman, I'm a musician. I come from a nature background before I was in music, working with connection to nature, medicinal plants, tree protection, forestry, woodland work, the old arts, and as I became a folk musician, the connection between the origins of the indigenous music of Great Britain, the ancient folk songs that come from the communities that go back ancestry in our land, and how much that is a music of adoration and devotion and love to the land, and how in a time that we live in now of Great Britain being one of the most ecologically depleted countries in the world, certainly number one in Europe, but far and away outstripping Brazil and Southeast Asia in terms of nature loss, biodiversity decline. We think of it as the green pastures, you know, the beautiful idyllic Eden that is England. Actually, we are a raised country struggling to have any nutrients and fertility left in the soil, 40 years of harvests left, and a decline in tree cover faster than most countries who are often very guilty of deforestation. And these issues that we're facing are symptomatic of the times we live in, the society that we live in, and the systems that we are at the mercy of in so many ways. And I, as an artist, have found my voice in being able to tell the stories and reveal the circumstances and the injustices that are happening towards our Mother Earth, and also the injustices that are happening to our many communities, contemporary communities living in Great Britain. And I found music as my platform, and I feel very lucky that in the last 5 to 6 years there's been an extraordinary turnaround of the way the power of the musician and the music industry has been able to kind of encourage a rethinking of the way we live and the systems we are sort of being co-opted by, and where music has the potential to make enormous change. The problems are different everywhere in the world, and what goes on in Great Britain is specific to there, and the issues that are going on here right now in North America are even more troubling from what I'm reading. Today, the news broke of the first ever environmental campaigner, Manuel Terran, in Atlanta, Georgia, was shot by the police, shot dead, as the first environmental tree defender down in a forest in Atlanta when the police sieged the terrorist camp, as is now being called. So what we are seeing is that interface between climate activism and nature defense and state control is becoming a very hot zone. And not to say it already isn't, but we are seeing it becoming more and more prominent. And so how does music fit into that? How do we storytellers take on that role as folk artists in the broadest sense of the word? How do we act as communicators and empowerers and inspirers of communities to take up the charge of protection? This is this is the discussion, and it can go in so many different ways because we all have individual as well as collective responsibilities, and they are very, very complicated to navigate. There's so much misinformation, there's so much information of what we do, what we don't do, and charting that path and each artist finding their own role within this is a highly fraught and uncertain thing, which often deters. And so I'm hoping that within this panel we are going to get here, and I'm going to pass over in just a moment to let you guys introduce yourselves and your journeys of how we can be a community to support each other in finding our voices, finding our purpose, finding the issues, and also know where we can put our support and what we can individually do but collectively do. From the technical, but also from the kind of emotional, from the pastoral care, which is so important when we start to really look into the state of the planet in the years that we have yet ahead of us. And so we're going to be talking for about 45, 50 minutes. We're going to refrain from doing questions for the simple purpose that we have the affinity group happening in Liberty at 11:30, and some of us are going to be over there with many other facilitators where we'll be doing one-on-one round tables to go into some real discussion between us all. So apologies if this isn't the space for questions to be asked right now, but we'll be there, and of course onwards if you do feel inspired and want to know more or want to share your story as well. So thank you very much for listening, for being here, and I'm going to pass on to the wonderful Jeneda now to tell us a bit more about yourself and your work. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Yat eta sitho. Hello everybody, greetings. She'e Jeneda Benally Yenishya. My name is Jeneda Benally. Be'ethle chi'i nishle. I am born for the Red Coat people. Ado Anani Twodichini Bashishchin. I am born for the Bitterwater people who originally come from the Eagle people. Ado Nakai Dinae Dashanella. The ones that they call the wandering people who came home are my paternal grandparents. Ado Polish Hoyegi Dashache. And the ones that they call, the ones who are called the Polish people are my maternal grandparents. Zitlejin de Nasha, Ado Kintlana e Shehawan. I am originally from Black Mesa, near Big Mountain in Arizona on the Navajo Nation, but currently I reside under the shadow of the Holy San Francisco Peaks in northern Arizona. I come from the Diné Nation, which is the largest land-based tribe in the United States. I am here with my brother as well. And a little bit about my journey is actually a lot with my brother, a lot with my family, a lot with my community. It's a lot with my land, my homeland. When I was growing up, I never saw a distinction between being an Indigenous person and an activist. It just was part of who we were, just part of who we are. My people, where I come from on Black Mesa, over 14,000 of our people were forcibly removed so that the coal resources could be accessed by Peabody Coal Company. Many of our people moved away because of the threats, the constant threats, the accommodation agreements that were signed. My family is one of the families that resisted relocation. that, that said we're not going to move. This is where our umbilical cords are buried. This is where our ancestors are buried. And no amount of money, no amount of pressure or stress will make us move for you to access this coal which destroys the environment. We already knew this. We've already known this. As Indigenous people, we have known that there is a direct connection between how we treat ourselves, how we treat our community, how we treat our environment. The sickness that our environment feels is the sickness that we feel. It's who we are. We are that intertwined. And there's become this incredible disconnection. And this is part of my journey. In, I think it was 2010, I sued the federal government along with my brother. We sued the federal government because there was a ski resort, there still is a ski resort, a small for-profit ski resort, which resides on the western slope, which is the sunniest part of the mountain, the Holy San Francisco Peaks. And the Forest Service and this small business, the ski resort, decided because Mother Nature wasn't making enough snow, that they needed to make snow. And so the ski resort had decided that they were going to use reclaimed wastewater. And I don't know if you all know, but reclaimed wastewater is not currently tested. It's never been tested for the endocrine disruptors that are in there. And so I'm also a traditional medicine person, and I've studied traditional medicine from my father my entire life. And so we fought this. We sued the federal government. We said you cannot put endocrine disrupting laden water on the slope of the mountain because it will affect the rest of the plants. It will affect our culture. It will affect who we are. And so I'm trying to make this in a nutshell, but goodness, it's a little difficult. So we ended up losing that court case, unfortunately, because everybody thought that skiing and making artificial snow for skiing was more important than environmental preservation and cultural preservation as well. So this is a part of who I am. Whether or not I'm an activist, whether or not I'm a traditional person, whether or not I'm a cultural preservationist, or whether or not I'm a mom who cares about our future generations, this is part of our identity. And I hope that by the end of this panel discussion, you will feel that this is also part of your identity, speaking for our Mama Earth.
Yat tasing flo Clayson Benally dasha Jeneda die shada Jeneda ado shema. Greetings, all my relations here. When we acknowledge ourselves with our clan system, as my sister identified, we acknowledge this as this is our family. So when we say our clan, we're not doing it just to hear ourselves as our own ego. This is a way of saying, are we related? Are we family? Who here is related to me? And that way I can identify you as maybe sister, mother, brother, uncle. That's the relationship that we're seeking to hopefully bond with. And when we acknowledge Shema no Hostan, our Mother Earth, all of these elements that we're interconnected with, this is a relationship. Everything that we're a part of a circle, we're a part of a community. So as we come into this space and we're acknowledging, I want to identify my mom, Benally, who is an OG, an original folkie. She's here with us, and she was part of our foundation as my sister was acknowledging what happened in Black Mesa, Big Mountain with the coal mines. here we have our father, Jones Benally, who's a traditional cultural practitioner, and our mother from New York, Greenwich Village, hanging out with the likes of Ramblin' Jack Elliott, Arlo Guthrie, not Arlo, there's Bob Dylan, I don't want to say his name, but he was part of that scene, but they relocated and moved to California and created rock and roll. She was part of that whole movement, and a lot of these influences, people that helped guide us on our path and our journey were amazing musicians that used their voice, that used music as that tool for communication. When I was a child and all of this was starting to unfold, the issue on Big Mountain, my mom, as a concert promoter, called on her friends, her allies, and they created the first Water for Life benefit concert where Jesse, Colin Young, Jackson Brown, my mom could tell you all the names, I think Bonnie Raitt was there, they all came out to support our issue. And that was like, now you hear about Dakota Access Pipeline and the Water Defenders. This was probably one of the first Water for Life concert, presentations that ever occurred to defend our homeland in Black Mesa for the Indigenous people. And so folk music for me and this journey that I'm on, it's always been interconnected. The lines have always intersected of using this platform, using music as a way to communicate what is happening. And look forward to sharing more of this journey and possible solutions, because it's so easy to identify the problem. We see it, we're all from this beautiful planet, we all have our roots connected, and how to address that and move forward, that's part of the reason and the discussion that I'm hoping to have with you all here today as well.
Hello, I'm Jake Blount. So nice to see so many familiar faces and so many new faces. I'm glad there's so much interest in this topic. I presently make my home in Providence, Rhode Island, but grew up in Washington, D.C., and my family has been around in the Chesapeake Bay region for, depending on which branch you follow, several hundred years or known recorded history, and seen quite an arc of environmental destruction and degradation, and more recently restoration in those biospheres. I got to grow up during a time when a lot of great work was being done to revitalize the Potomac River and the Chesapeake Bay watershed at large, and am continually inspired by the good work that the folks who are doing that and folks like these are doing. I have found my way kind of trippingly into being an environmental advocate, I guess, through my recent work, which has kind of engaged climate change as a topic through Afrofuturism, inspired by the late, great Octavia Butler, and very much see all of these issues as intertwined, and think there are a lot of considerations for our community, our industry, if we use the I word, to take into account about the role that we have to play, not only in being part of the problem, yes, but also of being part of the solution. We have a mighty legacy to live up to in terms of fighting for those things, and I'm excited to be part of the conversation.
Thank you, Jake. We were saying earlier that we can go in so many different places, and I'm reflecting upon what's been said here. It feels very much about the subject that connects us all is this relationship to the land and the gratitude. Jeneda, you've been talking about that. You're wearing the gratitude so eloquently, and within that, the privilege, the joyous privilege that we've had to have those relationships and to understand the threats that are affecting them, what revitalization looks like, what loss looks like, what degradation looks like. We're privileged because we have the sensitivity to seeing that and the vulnerability to know how that affects us collectively. And I guess my question for us is about how has that defined your creative journey and the choices you've made in seeking the platforms to speak up and out through your music, and how that has defined what you sing, what you say, what your presence in the world is right now, particularly. We can. I mean, whoever wants, no order necessary.
Okay.
Disorder, please.
I'll start by answering that, if I may. So growing up traditionally, my brother and I mentioned that our father is a traditional medicine man. And so we grew up going to ceremonies and singing all night. And when you have a ceremony done, the patient sits and we say you have a singing done, a ceremony. So everybody is around you and they sing over you for your health, for your well-being. And so growing up, going to ceremonies, singing with our father, we understood that the power of voice is greater than just words, that we use our voices in our culture for healing, that music is medicine, that it's also tells our history, our traditional history. It reminds us of the mistakes that human beings, that human people have made in the past. It reminds us of our relationship, our sacred relationship with Mother Nature, with all of the beings, with the winged ones, with the four-legged, all the two-legged, with all the beings, even the plant beings, the ones who grow from our Mother Earth, even the rocks, the water, the sky, all of this has spirit. All of this is just as alive as we are. And so we grew up understanding that music, that singing is part of who we are, and that we have to utilize our voice in order to create positive change, whether it's for a patient on their journey of healing, whether it's for a community in devastation and loss and grief, whether it's for getting a message out to people. And so I'm trying not to talk over my brother, but when we started playing music, having that folk background from our mom, we understood also that music is an amazing platform, and that if you have something to say, that you could say it in song. That universal heartbeat that music has is something that we can all relate to, right? Doesn't matter what language it's in, it's an emotion, it's a feeling. It's the way that it moves us. So we understood that there is an incredible platform through music to get messages out, to get the word out about different situations happening in the world. I'm trying not to monopolize because I get really excited about talking about things, and I'm also really interested in the dialogue. So, just with that, you know, music is an incredible platform. How many of you all utilize music as a way to get your messages across about community issues, about environmental issues, social issues? Yes. So we all know the power of music, the power of song, the power of songwriting. And so this is definitely a huge part of why we make music, is because it's healing.
There was a powerful moment that I remember kind of really connecting the dots I feel so honored to be up here on stage and to be able to share just a little bit of my story and my journey. But really, we all have mentors. We have people that come into our lives that guide us and give us strength and inspiration and help us on our journey. And for me, like growing up in the folk world, like I never aligned with my mom's music. She would always be like, oh, that, whatever was happening, as a youth and I was connecting with, I really identified with punk rock because what was happening on my community was so atrocious, like to be there with my elders, to be with my family and to see them crying and to see devastation, loss, to see forced relocation and what that means and cultural genocide happening to our people, it was very real. And as a child, I didn't know how to cope with that. It's like so many of our relatives turned to alcohol, to suicide, or our elders, when they were removed from their land and their sheep in that lifestyle and having to turn on a light switch. When somebody would turn on a light switch, it was funny because for me, growing up without electricity or water on our reservation where we had a dirt floor and they were extracting coal to make electricity for southern Arizona, for California, all of that was bypassing, us. We were just kind of a little speck on the map. There was the coal rights, the royalty rates, those were all, stolen, and the water rights, our access to the Colorado River, the shares that we should have, all those things were waived. So just being aware of the historical atrocities that are impacting us still to this day, where most of our nation still has, like maybe 1/3 of our nation doesn't have access to potable water. They have to haul, and if their truck is broke down, they can't get water. So even before I came here, just like washing out barrels and trying to get those to families in need, those are all like realities that we're still faced with. But going back to, it's like, those mentors or those people that came into our lives and, just being out in an area that was very rural that didn't have a lot of resources where I couldn't just go pick up music. My mom, she would bring in artists, she'd bring in, Richie Havens, Taj Mahal, all these amazing people. And I remember looking over their shoulder and I was so hungry, I just wanted to learn everything. And I identified with the drums. Here I was starting to connect with punk rock, but these mentors, they would be like looking over my shoulder, I'd be watching them and they'd be like, don't try to steal what I'm doing. Be yourself, your identity, who you are in this world, invoke. And that was the primary lesson that I learned, was about identity, about finding your own path, finding your own voice, and not trying to emulate or copy anybody else, and how to be who you are in this world and be comfortable with that. Those were important lessons I drew from, and I started to look at, okay, how do we communicate? What are we saying when we're on stage, and what is that power of that message? And we had some mentors that came into our lives, the Ramones. Joey Ramone was a big support of ours and really helped guide us, and CJ Ramone as well. They became part of our families. But I remember sitting there, because we used to talk about all these intensive issues with our previous band, Blackfire. We'd get up on stage and we'd play hard, heavy punk rock songs, talking about resistance, about struggle, about everything that just weighed us down, that was so traumatic for us. It was our therapy. So we're up there and I'm talking with Joey and I'm like, Joey Ramone, all right, so we play this song, Lobotomy. It goes, lobotomy, lobotomy. It's talking about slugs and snails, they're after us, DDT keeps me happy. And I'm telling him, we play this song, it's a cover, but I love to play it because it's something that kids can get mindless to. It was kind of my little pun, it was a joke, but he's like, no, this is a political song. And I started to connect that for him, he had grown up in a mental, there was a lot of challenges as a youth, and his mom, and didn't recognize that creativity that he had, and ended up institutionalizing them. And there's a lot of songs about electroshock therapy, gimme shock therapy, all this sort of type of stuff. And he said, this is a song for those that are voiceless, that are put into mental institutions and don't have their rights. And I was like, wow, that's so profound. So it's so unique when we look at this as a challenge of, the label climate justice or climate challenge or global warming or climate change. But for me, we have to look at in totality as an individual, as a person, your own identity. So when we connect with our earth, with our community, what is your body telling you? Who are you? What is your identity? Like when you wake up in the morning, where is there pain? When you walk, your body is already connected to this earth, to this place, and it's telling you a story. It's communicating what is wrong and why is there sickness? Why, this mother that we live upon, everything that there's an interaction, a constant communication. If we take a deep breath, that air, this air that we breathe, it's all shared. It's something that is generated. We don't have to think about it, but the way that our traditional teachings as Indigenous people, there's a whole process and philosophy of how that air interconnects in the wind and the sacredness and how we need to protect and preserve that. The water that we drink that feeds and nourishes us, just the same as this Missouri. And as we arrived here, the way that we acknowledged this place, this land, we honored and prayed to it. We gave an offering to give. And I think that's part of what we do as artists, is that we come into a community and we give. We have something to share. We have something to offer. And when we give rather than take, there's some distinctions that we are starting to, for me, these are very clear, important markers of what we have to offer as a community, of how we give, how we share, rather than take, drain, because that's what's happening with exploitation, with land, people, resources. That's part of the problem that got us to where we are today. So how do we repair that? How do we heal? How do we give, nurture, empower, and enrich?
Can I ask onwards? And I want to bring this to you, Jake. And it feels one of the emotions that's coming up so strong for me right now, hearing the stories of the environmental impacts of state and the British coal mining Peabody group, the kind of the questions of sovereignty and what and access to essential life, life elements, water, to the soil, to the land. The thing that arises so much in me here listening is rage. And I'm seeing such amazing grace from the two of you. And then sitting with who I've just met, Jake, for the first time, though obviously a great long admirer of your work. One of the gentlest souls in folk music you could possibly meet. Yet here we are discussing something that is affecting us in such profound cellular levels. How do we take this rage and catalyze it, convert it into the song, the speaking out? You're somebody who is wonderfully vocal on issues that have affected you and your community, and are wonderfully eloquent. How do you find that? How do you find that way? How have you found your way of being able to speak out and communicate without scaring away? And this is a question I have because I don't see enough of it here. I love this community, but I don't see enough rage. I don't see enough actual determined kind of fight about allowing that letting out that happens as much in ceremony as it does as thrashing the strings of a guitar. Jake, how does it happen for you?
I think still finding my way around that, as I'm sure all of us are. It's always a process of trial and error to figure out how best to get your message across. And sometimes I do scare people away from it. And I have embraced that as maybe a necessary facet of the thing I have to do. I think there are some people who are meant to be out there building the bridges to people who aren't on board yet. And then there are some people who are, exploring what it means to be here and understand our circumstances already. And I think it's been a complicated tale for me, and I would be interested to hear you speak to this also, because you're in a similar situation, because I'm working with traditional repertoire. I'm not writing my own songs, and particularly working out of the African American tradition, it's a complicated thing because we don't have a long history as a single consolidated culture group, right? Our entire culture history is indigenous to the ocean, and that was not a positive journey for us. And then we've spent centuries here on this land, and that has not been a positive journey for us. There hasn't been an opportunity for us to build healthy, stable, lasting relationships with land anywhere. And one of the challenges for me, digging through that traditional repertoire, trying to find a way to speak to this, is that that connection can sometimes feel absent. And, there are certain exceptions to that. We have a lot of water songs. We have a lot of songs about the wilderness, that kind of thing, but mostly in the biblical sense. But what I have found, and what I think we've all spoken a little bit to, is that there is a great awareness of the intersectional issues that underlie the topic of environmental justice, that in this country, Black people have been put in positions alongside Indigenous people of having their health damaged disproportionately by environmental malpractice, of having their livelihoods disproportionately impacted. That's a big part of our story. I think I have been able to grapple with that in whatever way I'm able to, by looking at those old songs and picking out the spots where I can say, okay, these folks didn't know about chemical pollution or climate change or whatever when they wrote the song, but these people absolutely hated the rich guy up the street who's hoarding all his money and not acting right. Like, these people wrote whole songs about, you join the church, but you won't live right? There's a whole message in there of hypocrisy of the ruling class, and greed and uncaringness and cruelty in the ruling class, and of innocent people suffering the consequences. And one of the wonderful things about taking those songs, doing something that's, Afrofuturist, that places them in a different context, is that some of the specific context that I have trouble engaging with as a queer person, that I don't know that Judeo-Christian ideas of engagement with the environment are necessarily the solution to our problem. It lets me find a way into that work that feels more aligned with what I believe and with my own take on my own culture. And that's been a journey for sure. And I think what I've landed on lately is trying to find a way not to force those songs to speak to the land or the ocean or any other place that we've been, but to invite the ocean and the land to speak in the music itself. I've been really inspired. I spend a lot of time with field recordings, as you may have guessed, as I know you do as well. I'm sure you two have done some digging in that as well. And one of the things that I love is that you can hear where they are. It's not just about the songs. You can hear the insects chirping. You can hear the wind. You can hear the trees. And on my most recent album, I did a lot of work of going out and recording sounds of the ocean or of land. I went and recorded specific pieces in specific places that felt like they resonated. And, I'm just starting the journey of modular synthesis and biofeedback sensors, so I can literally have plants play the music on a record. And it's exciting to me, the idea of, rather than speaking for the earth, inviting it to speak with me.
Beautifully put, Jake. I want to pay homage to one of the most profound moments of my musical career that actually happened in your homeland. Was a conversation I had at the Dine College in Arizona with a professor called Wilson Arrowneath Jr. He's a professor of Dine language and medicine work, and talked about the healing power of the song on the land. And I realized in that conversation one of what my role as a singer was, that how I kind of digest the grief that I have as having grown up, sharing with Jake, growing up as a member of the queer community, but also a member of the Jewish community, a not so recent arrival in the UK, finding my sanctuary, finding my place of healing and comfort and identity within the natural world, and finding that as my place of collegiate befriending and inspiration and my great teaching there. And that disconnect that I had seen within the music, the role of traditional music, that, as I mentioned earlier, has such a legacy of that antagonism between protection and reckoning with the responsibilities, with the need to love. It's the word love that comes in here. It's the best word that I know in my language to speak about how the songs play a role of compassionate reconnection, reaffirming, and the beauty of traditional song, and its repetitive, playful, continuous re-acknowledging of the things that hold sanctity and vitality. And the teaching from this time I spent with this professor was about how being a singer holds that duty of imparting and activating those songs within our listeners, within every place that we are, and how that creates that constant bond and constant that reciprocity of well-being, and that as musicians and as a singer, what I'm entering into is an act of healing, and that every place that I am in, that as a singer I have the gift of sharing my songs, of telling a story, of borrowing people's imaginations on a journey. That for me is a time of reckoning and opening, as well as cleansing the wounds that I carry with me, and that collectiveness, and that I feel empowered by the forefathers and mothers and who've carried those songs, carried our griefs, our ancestral griefs. Britain did as much damage upon our own societies as we did in our empire building and our colonial work. We started at home first and are living with the inherited traumas of that practice and that behavior upon our own land. We have an incredible civil rights land movement happening right now, with mass trespasses happening, and a reclaiming of what sovereignty to the land means for your average people, the general population. And it's a place of where song is holding great potency, and we're actually going through a kind of extraordinary re-understanding of where folk music holds a certain code into that, where maybe the music of protest that I'm seeing in the climate camps across the UK, the Dakota Pipeline, is punk, is rock, is hip hop, is rap, but actually there's this kind of wonderful place for folk music that I see in terms of being able to tell a much older truth and connect us to something very, very ancestral that may not be of our ancestors, but of our brothers and sisters and our wider community. So I'm finding this kind of, the times are very interesting as the tension grows and the impacts of what we're seeing expand and come closer to our front door as the waters rise. About how there's this wonderful quote from Bertolt Brecht when asked, will there be singing in the dark times? And his response would be, yes, we will be singing about the dark times. So I feel that's been a real sort of mantra for me in terms of about how we confront the darkness and sing it up. And yeah, I wondered if you can reflect more upon that, about where song has maybe helped you, supported you in those times of darkness.
Can I offer something? Back in the 1970s, there's a powerful song where, we're looking at boarding school era where there's a lot of displacement of Indigenous people, and from it, the American Indian movement was birthed, and there was a song that that was kind of given to this movement, and they call it the American Indian Movement Song, and it was kind of, I don't want to say designed, but the intention of this song is to bring and to call people back, to remind them, to bring them, if they were lost and displaced, so many of our brothers at that time were, struggling with alcohol addiction or whatever, and, going through a complete loss of identity. But this song, I'll sing just a little piece of it, because what it embodies and what it represents is exactly that. It's like going against the darkness in a way, and just like, putting it into the universe where it's just drawing that energy and strength and healing. And when I was a kid, I remember hearing it sung by so many individuals that were homeless, that were struggling with addiction, and my dad used to kind of refer to it as the Iglani song or something like that, but what it really meant and gave a pathway out of that darkness for so many people. But just thinking of some of my uncles, one of my uncles that passed recently, his name was Danny Blacko, and just I'm thinking of the people that I've had the chance to sing this song with, and what that represents, it embodies, and who's it. So these songs that we have, it's not just the song from my community, but think about the songs that come from your family, from your lineage, that have been passed down. These are heirlooms, and these songs identify our family all the way through. But when they sing, they give us strength. But they're exactly that. They're a way to repel darkness, but to remind us of our journey and where we got to go. Once I try to get my emotions together, because we just recently laid to rest our uncle, and we got to sing it with our grandmother, Roberta Blackgoat, who was the Geronimo of our era. She was the one who was the grandmother of our resistance. So when I sing it, I honor them. Yahweh Iha, Yahweh Iha, Yahweh Yahweh, hey, Yahweh 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 Yahweh, hey. These songs are connection. You know, every single family. You know, I know on my wife's side, she comes from Irish, German, French descent. But when she was in Tennessee, that kind of unique Appalachian culture, when they moved to New Mexico, transcended, and she would sit there, and I'd be there with my daughters, and they'd be sitting with their grandmother, hearing these songs, you know, like even songs like "She'll be coming around the mountain when she comes," and there was such a powerful history that was so rich that these songs were healing, and they were telling her journey. And this is my granddaddy's song. This was my, you know, we have to remember that each one of you is a knowledge keeper. Your elders, your predecessors, all of those people gifted you with something so precious and pure. Those songs that, you know, it's a shame when they don't connect with this next generation, when that history, when there's a disconnect, because that is a place. These songs are direct reflections of a place, an actual place where our umbilical cords going back so many generations, and it gives us a right. It gives us, you know, we all are born with this innate right and responsibility to be protectors, to be defenders of our family, of our Mother Earth. So these songs are, you know, they're empowering, they're gifts, they're precious, and they should lift you up, and hopefully you can teach them to your great-grandchildren, and they'll be carried on for generations as well, because that's the power of these songs.
We could talk for hours and hours, and nothing we could say could be more impactful than hearing you sing. And the song, it says 1,000 times more than some of the greatest speeches can do in terms of, lighting that fire, keeping the fire in the belly, burning bright. And we only have a few minutes left, and I'm looking at Jake here, going completely off script here, and wondering if there is a song or a verse or something that might, for you, embody that place of that you call into.
No.
I really no time to.
Maybe later.
Maybe later. Sorry, that was really
it's okay.
unfair
I
of me.
didn't come prepared. It's on me. I'll do my homework next time.
None of us come prepared, and I think that's the thing. When we're called up, that's it. It's well.
I would like to add, if I may.
Yeah, please.
I'd like to add, if I may, before, I don't know what time it is and what time with wrapping up, but I want to talk a little bit about the gratitude, the responsibility, and the privilege that we all have as artists, as people who have a platform, and that there's different ways that we look at what's happening with our beautiful Mother Earth. When we talk about fighting climate change, when we talk about all these things that we have to fight, all the solutions that we have to find to the problems, the root problems that we've created because we can't look further than our arm, because we forget that there are communities that are impacted by our decisions, by our choices, that are farther than our arms can reach. And so when we talk about fighting these things, we forget that we need to put down that axe for a moment, and we need to talk about the other side of that, and that's loving our Mother Earth. Because when we love our Mother Earth, when we love something, when we love someone, we innately want to protect it. We want to preserve it. So I'm challenging you all to look at what is it that you love about our Mother Earth? Because you don't have to fight anything. You just need to love, because that's where the strength of protection and preservation comes from. We have this responsibility as people who come from our community to talk about the issues, to intersect these issues, to let people know that, hey, this is what's impacting us. How are we connected in that way? Is it because you've turned on your light switch? Is it because you want to go skiing and you want to recreate on a mountain? How are we impacting each other? Because how we impact each other is how we directly impact the environment. What choices are we making? We all have a certain amount of privilege. I have a certain amount of privilege to sit here amongst these incredible people on this stage who are doing incredible work. When the Dakota Access Pipeline was happening, it was all over in Indian country. We all knew it was happening, but nobody else did. The cameras didn't turn on until Shailene Woody and the European American contingency of people stepped in and amplified that voice. When young Indigenous activists and advocates throughout North and South America have been speaking about the impacts of climate change in their community, that they were directly affected by the waters rising up into their sacred lands, covering places that they've long gone to pray that are so important to their culture, to their future generations, to cultural survival. Nobody listened until Greta Thunberg had mentioned it, until she sat outside her school. This is privilege. Your skin color, this is privilege. Your voice, your amplification, this is privilege. It's up to each and every one of us to utilize what you have. Take your strong points and utilize it as a tool to make a difference, because it's going to take every single one of us to remind each other to love our Mother Earth. And within that, we say thank you. We say thank you to Mother Nature. Thank you to Mother Earth for letting us know that you are sick. Thank you for letting us know that we're not treating you right. Thank you for giving us all of these warnings, these symptoms that you're having. The temperature's rising, things are melting. We're not making good decisions. We're not treating our mama right. She has been telling us this. But it's finally, we're hearing her. So what do we do? What do you do? What choices do you make? It's up to each and every one of us every single day. You are so much more powerful than you realize. You can do so much more, and you are doing more than you realize. It just takes that awakening, that remembrance, that we have gratitude for our Mama Earth, that we love her.
Please, can you give your appreciation and gratitude for these incredible human speakers, spirits, Jake, Clayson, Jeneda. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your fight and your work. You've brought this to a wonderful close, and I go out into those halls and wave your flags and speak up and out. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here.
Also, there is an affinity group in the Liberty room.
Liberty Affinity Group.
Yes.
Will you be there?
I'll be there for sure.
We'll see you soon afterwards for some chats there. Thank you all.